Hello, dear learners. Well, in this particular video, we're going to discuss the role of HR in mergers and acquisitions. Mergers and acquisitions are tools businesses use to achieve their organizational objectives. A merger and an acquisition is a very strategic decision an organization makes at a certain point of time in their growth strategy, where they decide they would want to increase their market share. They want to have a bigger presence in the organization. And they would want in the bigger presence in the industry. And they would want to leverage their growth a little more faster and a little more quicker. So one of the easiest strategies of growing is mergers and acquisitions. When you merge with when you are having another organization merging with yours, your entity becomes a little more bigger. You get more resources, you get more expertise of that particular firm. The competitive um, advantages of that particular organization becomes yours. Right. Similarly, when you acquire an organization, it gives you a much more bigger strength. You increase in market share. Your presence in the industry begins to be largely felt because of the kind of uh, impact that you're going to make in terms of sheer size, in terms of resources, in terms of advantages, and most importantly, in terms of the market share that you have. A merger is generally defined as joining of two or more organizations under one common owner and management structure. Either entity A merges with B and becomes B, or A and B merge together and create a new entity called C. Right? Whereas an acquisition is a takeover, is a buy over of another organization, where you feel that an organization has something. By buying that organization, you may get a bigger control, you may get a bigger market share, you may get access to more resources and markets. You tend to do that. So it's a valuation and it's a strategic move that you tend to do. According to statistics, uh, it says an estimated 70 to 90% of all mergers and acquisitions fail to achieve their anticipated financial and strategic objectives. The assumption with which we go while we are deciding to go ahead with the merger and acquisition, and the end result of what we tend to achieve very often is not very favorable, as we can understand from the statistics. The rate of failure is often attributed to various HR related factors. So it boils down to everything around people and people management. It could be with incompatible cultures, two different organizations, and many times in an industry when we merge and acquire, we often are merging or acquiring with a once upon a time competitor. You may have been competitors in the industry, and now you are coming together. So it gives rise to certain incompatibility in cultures because merging is not that easy. Management styles could change. There could be poor motivation, loss of key talent because there is a lot of anxiety, fear. Rumors also keep cropping up in the organization where employees are, when the right information about merger and acquisition is not shared with them, they may tend to think or perceive, whatever comes to their mind about what is going to be the future of their jobs, about the future of the organization, and gives rise to a lot of these kind of issues. And when information about mergers and acquisition is not communicated well in advance at every given phase of the merger and acquisition, and if it sometimes comes as a surprise to employees, or they get up in the morning and they read in the newspapers that their organization has been acquired by another entity, and sometimes they are in for a rude shock. And there is a lot of diminished trust and uncertainty on long-term goals. Firms are very desirous of creating that merger and acquisition, but sometimes do not have an action plan of what to do with the organization and do not have a strategic plan in future. So, what is going to be the role of HR in an M&A transaction is what this video is going to concentrate on. The consideration of a merger or an acquisition usually comes packed with mixed feelings, including excitement, fear, uncertainty, enthusiasm, and resistance. Sometimes if your organization has not been doing well, and if you're looking for a savior or a messiah, or you're looking for an organization to take over, and you feel that there is a different owner, or if the ownership or the management changes, then we might be in a better position. So sometimes it's seen as favorable, sometimes it's seen as unfavorable. So it depends on which from which side you are looking at things, but definitely there is going to be a lot of mixed feelings, a lot of anxiety, worry, fear, and all of that is going to be, is going to be in the mind space of the people there. How an organization deals with its employees. Now, this is where the matter comes as such. Why do employees in your organization have a mixed feeling? Why is there fear? Why is there uncertainty? Why is there a lack of trust? Why is there room for rumors? All of this possibly emerges from that source where the organization has not been in a position to explain things to their employees, or they've kept the employees in the dark. They've been The management has been going ahead with with merger and acquisition negotiations and discussions, but not a little information has been shared with employees. So when no information comes in, and whenever bits and pieces of information is leaked, right, employees tend to sometimes over exaggerate that information. Sometimes that's what gives rise to rumors. So it's very important for an organization to be able to communicate the decisions that the management is taking, or the course of action, the plan of action, what they think they want to do in the future, all of that to their employees. So keeping a loop of communication open with your employees through the HR professionals is often a very good aspect of how we can manage mergers and acquisition transactions and do not allow drastic decisions to be taken by employees. So both mergers and acquisitions present significant challenges, right? So the M&A process requires management of both organizations to consider the implications of a proposed merger or acquisition before agreeing upon, right? So which is both the entities were once upon a time erstwhile rivals, if they are merging and acquiring within the same industry, right? If they're merging or acquiring, if they are acquiring, merger doesn't happen, but if they are acquiring another firm in another industry, in the case of a diversification, that does not really matter. But when they are merging within the same industry, and that is where sometimes there could be a lot of people related issues, right? So it's important for an organization to take their time to do their research, to complete all the pros and cons, to look at the pros and cons from both ends and see what is going to be the implication, and then be able to anticipate the issues that will emerge, and then be in a position to handle or address these issues much well in advance. So HR professionals are often involved in the process by advising management on human resource matters, including use of surveys. And this is where the role of HR comes in. HR professionals need to get into the act of trying to provide the right information to your top management, wherein they should be able to conduct surveys. They should be able to uh, do surveys and understand the pulse, understand the feelings and emotions of your employees, so that you are able to tell, or you're able to communicate what the employees in your organization think and feel, so that you're able to present this case before your top management. And then top management also understands that this is what employees think and feel, and they can open that channel of communication and be able to assuage every sort of a feeling or emotion that could be working, against them. So, we're trying to see how we can create certain practices that can bridge or that can align how the two merging entities, or the acquiring entity, how we can create a common ground, how cultures can be blended, or how certain common practices can be blended, or how best practices from both organizations could be taken aboard and create something new. So that is an aspect that we could possibly look at. Another issue that we could possibly look at is once these organizations merge or we acquire another firm, what is going to be the strategic action further? Are we going to maintain the status quo and effect no change, or are we going to go ahead and make some drastic changes? And whether it's going to be a status quo or whether it's going to be a change, right? So these matters have to be dealt with a little more sensitively, a little more cautiously, and there must be a plan on how to operationalize these strategies. And this is where we need to take the HR professionals and the people into confidence. The management will have to do this to make sure that there are no sort of issues or difficulties that they will have to face later, right? Attempting to provide guidance to upper management on people perspective is going to be the job of HR. The HR professionals are going to be in between the management and the workforce. The management is the one that's going ahead with the merger and acquisition decision, right? So that information has to be well conveyed with the the workforce. The workforce's feelings, emotions, and all of these perspectives, what they think and feel, will have to be shared. So the HR professionals often act as a conduit. They often act as a bridge between both the parties and try to see how both parties are brought together on the same page. Assuming that a merger or acquisition has been approved, discerning all aspects of the two separate organizations and the one combined organization that needs to be affected, things have to be put in black and white, it has to be discussed. We need to be able to merge and blend things, right? So, all of that needs to be done. And communicating with employees, this is very, very important. Whether a merger and acquisition process is going to take 3 months or 6 months or 8 months or maybe 2 years, at every possible stage, right from the time when the management is thinking about going in for a merger or an acquisition decision, right from the time the thought process emerges, from the time the thought process emerges till the time we finalize the deal, at every stage of the merger and acquisition, it's important to keep the employees of the organization in the loop, right? So that there's no shock, there's no surprise, and you don't give room for any sort of untoward sort of decisions to be taken by employees. So it's a very important aspect for the management to build trust, to build confidence, and to be able to keep their employees, engaged in the whole process and assuage any sort of ill will or any sort of deficit in trust that they may possibly have. Devising ways to meld the two organizations. And this is where the think tanks of both the organizations will have to come together and see how we can create a middle ground, how the best practices and the philosophy of both the organizations could merge, the ideologies could merge, the cultures could merge, right? Try to look for ways and opportunities where we can meld is one of the important aspects of making the M&A successful. So dealing with the reality that M&As usually result in layoffs and superfluous employees under the combined organization. So a separate team will have to be created. Now that definitely is going to happen. Whenever a merger takes place, you're merging two entities. So what happens is functions get duplicated, departments get duplicated, teams get duplicated, right? So in that sort of a situation, uh, a layoff becomes inevitable, which means we are dealing with a surplus of employees, and those surplus of employees have to be dealt with, right? So, how are we going to go ahead with the layoff? How are we going to create exit plan for our employees? What is the criteria that we are going to be taking and doing? All of that is something that has to be discussed and has to be communicated. Because if you don't communicate, employees will start assuming, they may start jumping ship, or they may possibly start quitting the organization, and there could be a possible of employee turnover in your organization. So it's important for a firm to handle all of these very sensitive and very important issues in a very meaningful manner. And also looking for any sort of a legal issue that you could get into by breaking those federal laws or breaching any of the uh, labor or anti-discrimination laws. So it's important to make sure that your merger and acquisition is within the confines of law, that you are able to follow the legal guidelines, follow the provisions, and make sure that everything is properly dealt with and taken care of. Right. So participating in the defense of lawsuits that may be brought. Um, no, the possibility of the firm facing a lawsuit or trying to defend a lawsuit can emerge only when we have not looked into the guidelines, or we've not followed the legal provisions, or we've been, or a merger and acquisition or a people related issue like a layoff or sacking of an employee has been done without or by breaching the employee contract. So if there are breaches, that is when an employee feels victimized, offended, and feels that injustice has been done to the employee. So the employee may find solution in a legal recourse. So to make sure that such a kind of a thing does not happen, and the organization and the management does not land themselves into that sort of a trouble, it's important for the organization to make sure that they don't land at this point. Aligning the HR functions to achieve the organization's strategic objectives is very key, not just bridging of alignment of all the other practices. Even HR teams will have to be able to combine and come together and then be able to create a common ground, and then be able to have a team that naturally works together. And last of all, addressing the ethical dilemmas involved. wherein an HR professional sometimes could be in a very piquant situation, could be in a very difficult kind of a situation, where sometimes the HR professional himself or herself may lose his or her job, in the case of a surplus, right? Or they may have to sack or write layoff letters or give those orders of layoff to an employee working in the organization, or it could be a colleague who's working in the department, right? So it's a very sad and sometimes a very painful decision to take for HR. So sometimes they go through a lot of internal conflict and a lot of internal tension. So this is where sometimes the HR also sometimes see themselves, being drastically affected by the decision of the management to go for a merger and acquisition. So whatever may be the case, that is the reality of the job. So HR professionals will have to maintain their professionalism. They should be able to understand the situation of a merger and acquisition from both the management's point of view and also from the employee's point of view. And since you are the custodians of the people's interest, you are the caretakers of the people who are in the organization, and since you are this point of contact for both employees and the management, so it's important that HR professionals play that role effectively, are able to be that binding force between both the groups, and then be in a position that they are able to address these issues, and be able to sort out these issues and see how they can contribute from their end to make the merger and acquisition for an organization work, so that the organization is able to go ahead and then achieve their strategic goals and objectives. And HR professionals will be in a position to see how they can align the HR functions and activities to the strategic objectives of the organization, and then see the growth and the expansion and maybe productivity and profitability for the organization.